Hello and welcome everyone to the Overdose and Chill 154 actually. So quite the milestone. We're starting to get pretty high up there. I'm Ryan. I am the Chief Experience Officer at Overdose, and today I have a very special guest, an absolute legend, in fact, the founder and CEO of New Zealand's leading natural health care and beauty products, which is part of Aotea Made as the business. Tama. So thanks for coming along, Tama. Really enjoyed this whole session you coming to talk to us today.
Thanks, Ryan. It's quite nice to be here. I actually don't do this stuff too often, so it's always fun kind of like sharing what we are and what we're trying to do. So yeah, appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's a Friday afternoon, 3:00 here in New Zealand, and I feel like I'm going to struggle a wee bit. So therefore, we got our ears ready. And that's the whole nature of this call, is to be an OD and chill. So anyways, let's dive suddenly into the weeds, I guess, straight into it. For everyone that actually doesn't know, I guess the New Zealand culture as well, it may be very important to say that when we reference Aotearoa, which I'm sure Tama is that you will reference Aotearoa, is that that's a Te Reo Māori for New Zealand, by the way. And I think that's really good context for everyone. But let's kick into it. So Aotea Made, Tama, what is it for those that may not have heard of this product before in their life?
Yeah, sure. I think it's actually quite an interesting way to get started. I think the word Aotea versus Aotearoa. And Aotea is an island, maybe half an hour by plane or 5 hours by ferry from Auckland. And it's ours, a word for cloud or world. And Te is an old word for white. And there's an archipelago of islands that kind of stretch from almost the Poor Knights, even further north, down to Ahu. And in terms of like kind of Polynesian migration, they say in our kind of like corpus of mythology that they kind of stumbled upon that archipelago of islands, and that Aotea, being Great Barrier Island, I should probably say that as well, that's the English name, was the largest of that island chain. And the traditional ways of navigating, one of the tools that our ancestors would use is kind of the kind of orographic kind of collection of clouds. And so they named Aotea about the same size as Aitutaki, which is part of the Eastern Polynesian kind of archipelago of islands near Rarotonga. They named it, the white cloud, or a new kind of world. And they say that they kind of hit that landmass and they go over the hill and they see the rest of the North Island, Tika Maui, and essentially kind of Aotea is maybe the a miniature version of all of New Zealand. So Aotearoa, as you well know, is land of the long white cloud. So in terms of just like the etymology of for the word, that's kind of where it comes from. And in some ways, actually, it's nice kind of vector or medium with regard to what we do. And Aotea, as I was saying, the namesake of the brand comes from Great Barrier Island. It's largely, I think, an expression of or inspired by what it was like growing up there. So I grew up on the Papakainga. There's no utility for power or water, and you may have heard this a few times, Ryan, but no supermarkets, no shopping centers. And so the range of products that we make are largely inspired by that upbringing. And my grandmother was what we call a rongoa practitioner. And rongoa is kind of a catch-all phrase for kind of health and wellness. And we use things like kawakau, komaraho, manuka, harakeke, things that I was exposed to, and my family, and wairahapu. And we kind of, spin these into kind of value-added products. And we started the skincare stuff in 2019, and kind of early on in the journey and kind of figuring a lot out as we go about it. But we've got our own farm and extraction facilities and beehives. And so we're vertically integrated. And hopefully that's not too much of a smashing of an introduction, but that kind of maybe captures a few things.
No, that's primo. It was actually quite interesting because obviously you guys use natural ingredients and the Māori heritage in terms of how you formulate these particular healthcare products. We did this little exercise a while back, if you remember, and I asked the question to people internal at Overdose about what these natural products, how they associate themselves to these natural products. And it's super interesting around how many people actually came back to us and said, oh, my grandmother used kawakau.
Sure.
we understand we understand that product and the value that has, and the health benefits that has. So the whole historical kind of ingredient like that, it does actually mean to us Kiwis that are actually involved in that, and bringing that into probably a more commercial business, as much as you might hate that saying. It's quite interesting how many people actually resonate with it too.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's also quite nice for there to be a renaissance of, as you describe, our parents' generation and so on, that we're probably more closely tied to the environment and just naturally more maybe intuitively aware of these words. And it is you see manuka everywhere. And I think just maybe one thing in terms of kind of context actually on some of our native flora and how special it is. New Zealand's like the largest landmass that experienced it's like type of isolation. So it's a really young island chain. But we have flora here that isn't anywhere else in the world because it was, I think, isolated, if that's the right word, I think 110 million years. And so you had a certain kind of cultural biodiversity, if you like, where, things propagated and evolved on their own without any kind of pollination or cross-pollination from various other land masses. So manuka is a really good example. I mean, there's only one flower in the world that has a plant agent, it's a type of terpene that anyway bees turn into methyl glycol, which is what makes manuka honey really special. But you can't go to any other flower to actually get that plant agent, which is just one kind of bit of flora that this country's done a lot of research on. But kawa is, as he says, kind of everywhere, or you kind of hear it kind of in teas and in bread and all that kind of stuff now.
So what was your shining moment when you're like, I need to do this, right? Like you obviously have such a strong heritage and you understand all this by living and breathing. I guess like even like the likes of Great Barrier Island, and like when did you come to decide saying that I want my whole story to be this business, right? Because it actually sounds like a lot of this is actually, kind of like your story in a sense.
That might be fairly accurate. I think, I don't know if this is the right forum for it, but where I grew up, it was maybe 30 years ago. I'm 33 now. So 30 years ago, rural areas, they were a bit more busy, and there's just been a real, pretty significant net migration to the cities. But like all rural areas, there were some problems around, just kind of poverty, really. And I studied law after school with the intention, like the rest of my immediate family, around doing what we can for our people. I mean, we are, dare I say it, overrepresented a lot of negative socioeconomic statistics. And then realizing that the best way to kind of help our hapu on the island that live there is by actually doing something where we can create jobs. And we've got, not many people know this, but since inception, we've got a scholarship for rangatahi for the youth there, because I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to high school, but most of the people I grew up with didn't. And again, I think the business is ultimately like an expression of trying to create jobs and develop infrastructure to help the people there. So I know it's a bit waffly and kind of all the rest of it, but that's really it. We don't talk about this in our comms or anything like that, but maybe we should. But it's a real driver.
Yeah, I guess to be fair, like people do like this storytelling, right? Like you're not creating a business for the nature of making money, essentially, right? Like you're giving back to communities. You're also giving hope to people as well. I truly believe that, right? So, and especially in that, like our culture, like, some people are naive to think that, our history can actually develop into something new and fresh, but still sustain a lot of those core values that it should. And I think that's what you guys have really nailed that, to be fair. Right.
Oh, and there's more work to do there too, Ryan. Like, I mean, we can just go off on a tangent, as I was
saying earlier. Tangent, bro. Go on your tangent.
I don't know. It's one of our things. I mean, we're still figuring things out, and we're still, we run the scope of the business is quite wide, so we've got a whole bunch of stuff that can go wrong, and we are still getting the front end stuff, in terms of positioning and what we call the product and pricing, all that kind of stuff is still on its way. And we are doing some strategy on it at the moment. But one of the things that kind of appeared to me quite early on is that the country doesn't really have any primary resource business that's really nailed like the premiumization of a category. Like let's say Frontier being a good example. There's poured so much into this cheese kind of high end that they just couldn't crack, and they couldn't compete against Switzerland, all those guys. And so part of, I suppose, using native flora gives us a fairly wide moat with regard to accessibility for other competitors. But yeah, it is, as you say, it'd be pretty cool to build a significant business that's good for the country and all that kind of stuff, but also kind of inspires and people can be proud of. So yeah, I better remember there.
Well, I think Kiwis are proud of it, right? I guess like is it a challenge for you to actually? You say you don't talk about it much, right? Like it's obviously part of the brand. It's in the name. In fact, let's be honest. The packaging is beautiful and it feels so sustainable and natural and kind of reflects the products the way it should. But how do you kind of express the value from this, using traditional Māori herbal sort of remedies and Māori culture to tell a story? Like, what is your strategy behind that?
It's interesting. Growing up, the way I grew up, the idea anyway, you're inspired by your heritage, but I think it's important that the way again, I'm one person, but not letting it kind of define you too much. And again, I'm not too sure who's watching or listening to this, because I'm making trouble. But I do think, again, this might be a massive arc that might not be relevant, but I do think about this. When the first kind of colonial contact happened in New Zealand, you had Maori wasn't even a thing. And there's a lot of theories for where the word Maori comes from. I mean, the kind of current leading theory is that it means normal, but I've been told other stuff. But and so there was no real law or body of. We had tikanga and kawa that kind of gave a framework to work by, but with since like 1780 through to maybe 1830, 1835, when the declaration before the treaty was signed, you had a real kind of weaving of philosophies from the West and then kind of weaving that into a Māori philosophy. And it is interesting navigating this at the moment, because we do use native flora and it is inspired by a very like Te Ao Māori way of thinking and my Te Taha Māori, but making sure that there's actually kind of innovation within that space as well, and kind of moving forward. If that makes any sense, I think it's something that I might get in trouble saying this, but one of the I love this resurgence of Māoridom, but I also think it's important not to be too wedded to our kind of framework, let's say, and think about how Māori can evolve within the Te Ao Huri, which is like the ever-changing world. So with our business, we kind of try and kind of adopt those principles rather. And so, as just going back to that again, I'm just like kind of dumping my thoughts, but the brand retain that kawa or those underlying principles, but it can kind of adopt like a more modern way of thinking perhaps, and we try and weave our philosophy within it, to not be defined by it, if that makes sense.
No, that completely makes sense. Like, especially when you are coming in with that innovative mindset. We will talk about the other things that you do. You're not just one person on one brand, of course. But before we do go on towards that, like when you started, this whole business, and I guess even prior to this business, what were those values then? And do you think your values have changed, or do you think you've sustained those values over the past 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think it's also something I've got to remind myself of, like that Northern Star that kind of is omnipresent kind of thing. I would like to think so, but yeah, you do kind of get, all of a sudden, a year and a half past, oh man, we're still doing things the way that we thought we would. So for us, we've always had certain ideas that we haven't, I don't think, departed from. Part of that is, if you're going to lean into Te Taha Māori or Māoridom, you need to make sure it's done in a Māori way. Dare I say, maybe contrary to what I just said, but that's why we've taken the longer, harder approach of actually cultivating, using our land, having, a plantation, let's say, or like a farm, and that vertical integration, although everyone said that's stupid, doing it on a remote island with no energy or electricity, it's felt correct. And so when you have these decisions that you have to make at a higher level, although the business is very small, but mind you, it helps you kind of make the decisions when you have that center to use, if that makes sense. So with that somewhat solid center, it's really hard to leave that too much. And part of that, again, is the scholarship for rangatahi, putting kids through school, which is really cool. And our first one's just going to go into university in Canterbury, which is really nice. And yeah, kind of trying to create jobs. And that's part of the whole energy thing too, right? It's such a departure, but it's also really important for our people there to reduce energy poverty.
I think that's a probably pretty good segue to change a hat here in a way. So you don't, you wear many hats. So obviously we've talked about Aotea Made, and we'll come back to Aotea Made later on in the chat. But what's this other business that you have going on, and how does that all tie into your philosophy and your values?
That's thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. Maybe just returning back to what we're discussing, like we've got another business in the electricity sector, or energy storage renewable sector, and despite there being such departed or separate disparate industries, they are really wedded and tied to the center that I speak to. So as I said earlier, those that live on the island do kind of suffer from energy poverty or maybe a lack of energy security. And also with our business, we had to think, well, do we continue to invest in the island and, build systems and structures? And so we started looking at, everyone's largely, everyone's off the grid, but mostly it's, diesel generation, maybe some solar, some battery stuff. And so we looked at what would be required to continue manufacturing and what kind of solar array and battery bank you'd need. And the issue with intermittent generation is that it's all about storage, and you have these solar panels on your roof, let's say, but when you're at work and you're not using the power, then it's just this is underutilized. And so 2022, throughout COVID, we looked at what it would look like if we actually laid a grid ourselves, and on the Papakainga, kind of develop some infrastructure where we could share the surplus power, if you like. And we got a professor of computer science, and so some people in the industry have been looking at this stuff for a long time to give us some guidance, and we prepared a feasibility study for the government. They really liked it. The modeling or the forecasts they really liked, and so they actually kind of gave us a contract to actually fulfill or kind of meet these models that we'd given them. The only issue was you can't buy these products off the shelf. So just again, maybe I'm not making too much sense here, but we're building on our other business, we're building energy storage products, and they're essentially smart batteries. And we believe that the future is electric, and the vision for that business is that over the next 10, 20, 30 years, to meet our electrification goals as a country, we want to build the tools that actually allow every home to be a miniature power plant. And it's a cool vision to work towards. And our mission is kind of create these tools to affect this future, make it happen, kind of thing. And we are using our little kind of area on the island as like a pilot kind of test case for the hardware and software and electronics, and it's going really well. We're making some really good progress there. And so that's kind of the other business, but again, they're tied to this theme or philosophy around what is number one, what is good for our little corner of the world on Aotea, and then also trying to look at that lens. The lens being a scalable business that actually has a future. That's kind of, I can obviously drill down more on it if you like, but yeah.
You're an absolute legend, eh?
I'm a dreamer, and that's
I truly mean it. Like it's very fascinating, because I guess for people that don't actually know how it's not massively isolated, the island, like from north of Auckland, how long's the boat ride?
About 5 hours, 4.5.
Yeah. So it's actually well, I should actually say it is very isolated. But then at the same time, you're not actually starting off with creating a business as such. You're trying to define a solution for your island, right? And then you kind of take that secondary approach on, like you said, how do you scale that to actually make it viable and into something that kind of forms more of a business. But your first step is, I'm kind of solving a problem for my island, and you know, for my people as well. And then I've got that kind of future mindset on, let's use every home as a little, like what you said, like what you use, like an energy bank or some type, and then actually
that's exactly it.
Completely innovative. So it's what you said before, and now I feel like I'm ranting, but I love how you kind of like take that, your values and that culture, and then you apply innovation to it. It's that nice healthy balance, or and that storytelling is for someone like myself who grew up in New Zealand, also have a Maori heritage in my family. I think it's just it's a beautiful thing.
I mean, and as you last time we caught up at your office, one of the things we really have to work on is how we distill this clearly, how we articulate it. It's a bit of a minefield actually, because you've got this significant hierarchy of values, if you like, that you need to figure out which one is priority of the other. Because if you can only say one thing, what would it be? And maybe it's more on the philosophy side of things rather than the product, perhaps. But yeah, that's where we need some.
How does this blend in with Aotea Made? Is it, well, I guess the values kind of remain the same in terms of where it's from, and still using cultural aspects to develop it into a business. Is there does it power the farming for Aotea? Like, is there?
Sorry, that's a really valid point, Ryan. I suppose the real catalyst for us pursuing this was we got a solar array on our farm, and a big battery bank, and they're like, well, when we're not using it and it's powering down or whatever, can we just lay a massive line to the community and the cluster of homes there? That was really the driving behind the what really made us want to do this, because we had the power there, so we just wanted to just distribute it, if you like. So that's kind of the tighter relationship between the two entities. And now that we're kind of, we've got a warehouse in Auckland in the CBD, and we're laying like a grid there, like a faux grid. We've got these battery banks, and we've got solar on the roof. It's quite a big warehouse. I think all up occupies maybe 900 square meters, because it's big storage and distribution, etc. And we're now just really cutting our teeth and refining the intelligence aspect, so that the batteries know, okay, there's the weather's doing this, consumption rate's this, I can definitely share to the next battery, and they're in deficit. And then we're going to take all these systems and literally just drop them over as like a blueprint onto the cluster of homes on Papakai near the Marae. And then from, I suppose what's going to happen after that is we want to really drill down on commercialization. So pipeline, and I'll leave that because that's another whole killer fish. But it's really exciting, Ryan. We're actually pretty pumped. We've got some momentum now, which is nice. Just have to make sure I don't forget one or the other and drop all the balls.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the challenge again, like, keeping that value and then start commercializing it. You don't want to deteriorate that value at the same time. What sort of roadmap are we talking? Can we talk about that? Or
on the energy side?
Yeah, on the energy side.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had we're effectively building a peer-to-peer microgrid, and we're building the tech to allow for that. We're the only company, as far as I know, definitely the only company in New Zealand building a whole stack. When I refer to the whole stack, I mean the battery itself, which is the hardware, the electronics, which are the like the circuit boards that allow programming and kind of the smartness, perhaps, and then the software are just the coding or firmware, both by way of the app as well as the back-end infrastructure architecture for the software. So we're doing that all in-house. We've got maybe 5.5 engineers, and the roadmap is once we've got a demo day in the first week of June. We're bringing some people through the warehouse and we'd love you to come along, Ryan, if you're free.
100%.
We're going to actually.
I'll be there.
We'll send one, and invite your way, Ryan. We've got an app, and so we're going to get some of the people that come along to actually attach their app to the battery, and then actually actualize the trading side of things and the sharing. And that's the first gate we want to get through, and then after that, it's deploying this on the island, making sure that it works well. And we're fairly aggressive with our plans here. Concurrent to this, we are then kind of setting things up that allow for us to take on some other opportunities, and there are some microgrid applications we've got in with the various entities. Some of them are rural, and then some of them are for developments that are happening over the next 2 or 3 years. But I'm also super cognizant of the fact that we need to get into market. And a lot of this is still up in the air because it's all about pricing, whether you can deliver, and that's they're fairly onerous. So we are looking at really narrowing our focus against the private market, so homeowners. And once our kind of product's been signed off, we're going to go to market and start, just in a very muted way first, and make sure that they're working well. And the battery and solar market is growing about 30% year on year, so it's a nice kind of market to be in. Is that your sort of feel for it?
That's a really good roadmap, to be fair. I can actually see such a need for that in this country, like for sure.
Right. Sorry.
No, carry on.
Oh, I was just it's interesting. I'm just waxing lyrical here. I'm not hijacking anything, but it's interesting because the problem that I think is ahead, we're not feeling yet. And if you think about electrifying the fleet, where every car goes electric, whether or not this happens is a massive if still. But every new build, I believe the Labour government brought it in. Every new build can't have natural gas. So cooking, as in food cooking, as well as heating your water, has to be electric. And if you combine, like if you get a family of 4, they get an EV. The standard consumption for a home is 20 kilowatt hours, and then an EV 60. I'll try to stay away from the numbers, but we just don't have anywhere near the electricity we need to electrify the whole entire country. And if we do electrify the whole entire country, you've got these centralized assets like big dams and all the rest of it. We're going to have to either build more or have solutions like this, where rather than a centralized asset, you've got decentralized or distributed assets across the legacy grid fabric. And then you've got these infrastructure and distribution lines that have to be upgraded. And we just, as a country, actually can't afford it. I think the Boston Consultancy Group came out with a report. It's going to cost like nearly, I think it's in the 90s of billions of dollars to electrify the next 20, 30 years. And we just don't have that money at all. And there's we're getting quite excited because perhaps the product we're building actually fixes this by, as we were just saying earlier, if every home can be a tiny, tiny, tiny miniature power plant, and they can be somewhat self-sufficient. And then if there's a real load on the grid, they can start to dispatch or discharge their batteries into the grid to take the load off. And Tesla did a really good job in Texas, where Texas about to have a blackout, and every Tesla battery bank owner, they got a notification saying, "Hey, look, they're willing to pay you this for the power. Can we recruit your battery and actually dispatch on your behalf and sell it into the grid?" And you say yes or no. And that happened at scale. And so you had, all at once, this power going into the grid to alleviate the load. Sorry, I know this is really technical and probably way kind of off topic, but it is a really evolving landscape. And it's something that, we're mindful how, I'm a dreamer, and this is a bit of a pipe dream, to be fair. But there's an opportunity that we're really hoping to have a crack at. And it starts in the Aotea, it starts in the barriers. So that's kind of pretty nice too.
That's where it all sits. I've got this itching question, and other listeners on the podcast are potentially thinking it. How do I ask this? So you've got these 2 different streams of work, right? You've got this one that's skincare and health products, which is very natural, but also very scientific in the sense of, what you're formulating to create skincare that actually does what it should. Then you've got this other aspect that's electrical engineering, and it's a whole other different field. Are you that kind of person that's like, I've got this idea that I know I want to do because that's what, the country needs, or whatever's going through your mindset, then you figure out how you do it? Or are you just a brain box that just kind of understands all these different industries and then can somehow develop these businesses into something?
I think I'm just a sucker for my own curiosity, I think. I was into physics when I was younger, but never really into chemistry. And both businesses are a form of chemistry. I mean, the storage is electrochemical. We're using lithium iron phosphate as a chemistry, but we are actually looking at other alternative chemistries with Lab in Wellington, aluminum ion being the one at the moment. But I just can't help myself, and I can get kind of obsessed, and then Yeah, I feel bad for, we've got our team, I think, across both businesses now is maybe 24 or so. And I do often get eye rolls, I think, like, oh my God, this guy's fucking, whatever, sorry, excuse me. But so yeah, I do have to be kind of careful. I'm not delusional, which I know I am. So just trying to mitigate that as best I can. So I think, yeah, that kind of, it's the time and resource allocation, which is the real challenge at the moment, because in our business, they're both really difficult businesses because they're quite spread. You've got, a farm and cultivation practice. You've got engineering. Even our distillery, we've engineered so that there's water reticulation, so you don't lose any water, because it's such a water-heavy process.
Yeah.
And so you kind of like, get stuck into that, and you kind of, spend time doing that, and then all of a sudden you think, oh wow, like haven't applied to, all these really other important things or people. So yeah, that's one thing but we've got a really good team, and I think culture is actually a really interesting thing as well. Trying to, everyone feeling as though they're on the journey, and not just some crackhead like me.
And you have people to tell you and control some of this behavior from you, to say, oh no, Tama, that's a bad idea, or do you just take the risk and hope it works sometimes?
Yeah, I think yes. Yes. It's so funny. Sometimes it depends what kind of mood you're in, and I'm again very, very aware that I don't know if we should kind of go into this kind of stuff, but it is a funny kind of way of thinking, because I love yeah, kind of with a group of people trying to solve a problem. It's really, really fun. And even on the skincare side, our ambitions there are, and I think we discussed this with you earlier. We wanted to create a business that created enough cash flow so we could reinvest it back into that business to really get into the science. And so now we commenced R&D, and again, started COVID, but we really had to pull back because it was really hard to get anything done. And now we're recommencing, isolating these plant agents like myristicin that are super anti-inflammatory, and some of the other kind of plant agents that we're working with in other bits of flora, one of which is really interesting. It's really antiviral. And it's just a really regulated space. And so you're trying to weigh up, again, competing time, competing resources. And when we have we do have advisors on that side, and when we work with them, it's so much fun when you kind of try and piece things together. And you've probably seen exactly how we're trying to marry all these elements in a cohesive way so that people understand who we are and what we are. And that needs to represent the product. And at the end of the day, you don't have a business if you're not selling product. So it is a bit of a it's definitely a bit of, if I can say, a bit of a, how do you say it, like an enjoyable mess, maybe.
Yeah.
So
when I started Overdose was an enjoyable mess as well. I know that pain, but it becomes addictive, right? Like, because you're problem solving and you've got this vision up here, and you're trying to fill that void and that gap. But finding the balance must be a tricky thing for you too, right? Like, you've got two streams of businesses that need your brains and your focus, and understandably, you've got really strong teams that can make decisions for you. But is that stressful for you? Like, you're like this true entrepreneur that's like trying to solve problems and two different streams of work. Yeah. How do you manage that in general?
I think sometimes I don't.
I like the honesty.
Yeah, I can really pain on certain things, and it's so fascinating. You have periods where it's just I think they refer to them as sprint sessions, or sprint periods, but it's really chaotic, and then all of a sudden, you've actually arrived at an outcome that's not perfect, but it's something you can work on and iterate. And I mean, perfection should always be something you pursue, but it can also be the enemy of good, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of getting to market, getting money in, and then making things better. Because sometimes you can spend so much time on trying to get things perfect, which I think we got to balance for sure, because it is important to make sure you do a really good job. But it's also, I think, having the freedom to kind of grow. And as a business matures, we should have there's a period of desperation where you really need to kind of get to market and kind of start. But it's horses for courses. Every product's different. Every industry is different. So you got to be really mindful of that as well. But yeah, I definitely do end up in periods where I think this is kind of a bit outrageous, but I think it's working. And hey, in 6 months maybe it's all coming apart and have to go somewhere else. We'll see.
It is, yeah, you're right. You have to get to market. You could psych yourself out and keep overdeveloping that product that you're trying to, essentially get to that perfect level in your head, but you'll never get there, right? And I think for a lot of businesses is when you go to market, that's when the learning starts to really stream in, comes in thick and fast. So to that question with Aotea Made or Aotea Energy, like what are the key learnings that you've had since you've started these businesses? And you can talk as a brand, you can talk as a product, you can talk as yourself, and all the time and effort that you've put towards this company. Keep it open-ended.
Yeah. Learn a lot and learning more still. I think this idea that that you enjoy what you do is so important, and the team is everything. I'm so lucky to be around these people, and we've got such a spread as well. We've got these really young guys on both businesses, and we're in Auckland anyway. We all work under one tent, and so you've got these engineers, and you've got people in marketing. Let's say, and it's what's really fun. Kind of doing the problem solving stuff's awesome, but it's also I really enjoy, and I'm learning a lot, and kind of figuring out and how important it is for your strategy is only as good as you can articulate it and communicate it. And so it's been a really fun journey and learning this, over the last few while, how important that is. It's been really, really fun getting people together and trying to map this all out. So I would say the biggest learning has been working with people and knowing how important it is that everyone kind of is going in the direction that they can absorb and take on that personality or DNA of the business and the brand and what it wants to be, and then affecting that and pushing it ahead with everyone else. I think it's really important, especially in a business where, as I say, on both of them, we're doing they're really wide in their scope, and you'll have someone on the software through the design of the battery, let's say, and it's so when they both share that idea and way of thinking, it's so much more cohesive. And although, as I was saying, it's maybe a bit of an untidy mess or organized mess, maybe having everyone together and every day talking about how we're doing things and stress testing our thinking has been a massive learning, because I'm definitely driven by intuition and gut, and then trying to underpin this with other ways of thinking and data. And you'll like to actually know, Ryan, we're doing a lot of internal market research, and we've seen out lots of questionnaires and stuff, as you pointed out maybe 2 or 3 months ago, how important that was. And so we've got a number of them going out at the moment. So that even answers the question, I'm not too sure, but yeah.
Two things on that. One, that you love that you bring everyone internally on that journey. I think for your staff to be essentially to allow them to really grow is that they have to be completely aligned. And two, I love the group session situation as well. Like even doing it with yourself a couple of months back, I'm going to do it with you guys next week as well, is what I've seen from yourself as a leader is that you allow everyone to have a voice, right? And you listen. You're not necessarily like undermining anyone because you're the founder. You actually allow them to have that voice and take it constructively. Even the first time when I talked to you, it was quite funny. I was like, I just asked you a really blunt question. I called a spade and say, well, you need to sort this out. And you were like,
that's right.
Totally. I don't answer that question because I don't know. And you're right. We need to get this information. And I think that's really important overall as a leader too.
Oh, I just really quickly as well on that, Ryan, you talk about inspiration, all the rest of it. And, every now and then Overdose is such a great success story, and it makes people think, okay, yep, they've done it, so it's possible. But also the way that you can kind of convey an idea, and it's something that when we mentioned this, maybe it was like a week or two ago, around I can't remember how you phrased it, but it was ultimately make sure that you're not you don't go down the wrong path as a consequence of what you think's right. And you said to me, you said this, you said, oh, you're saying you think, it's like you need to know. I think you should do this, you should know. So that's also another learning, in terms of kind of taking that on and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Any clients listening to this, they've probably heard me say that to everyone. I remove the I think, and you need to actually have the confidence and the information to actually transform that conversation. I love that. I love that actually, was a bit of a moment for you. That's what's key. I just want to quickly ask a question in terms of Aotea Made. It's a bit of a tricky one, but how do you define the balance between natural and scientific as a way, right? Because from an outside perspective, people can see that as two very different things. So what is that balance between natural remedies and science?
This is such an interesting topic because, again, I can't be guided too much by my own bias and prejudice, but in this space, you've got varying levels of science, and you've got different levels of integrity, or kind of in a clinical sense. And you can do a clinical trial, which is what's referred to as in vitro, and it has a completely different outcome, or you can exercise that research in a different way with in vivo. And in vitro is kind of like in a test tube, and with in vivo is like in kind of sample with people. And it's so fascinating because I think everyone around the world is kind of starting to maybe question resources and peer-reviewed kind of articles. And again, this might be a completely off the kind of bit of a tangent here, but the way I look at it is we are looking to underscore some of our ingredients with this kind of clinical research stuff. But at the end of the day, in the beauty space anyway, it's or health space, these, unless it's like really, really, really researched and it's pharmaceutical, it's just a therapeutic aid. And as you say, trying to get a therapeutic aid to hold hands with something that's medicinal is really difficult. And it's actually it can be a little bit, people can kind of peer behind the veil and say, well, you're making all these claims, it's not working. And I think that's really important. There's a saying I really like by Winston Churchill, which is lies, lies, and damn statistics. Because you can use statistics to kind of paint a picture. And I actually think that science, low-level science, is actually kind of a form of marketing, and high-level science too. Because and we can maybe next week we can give you a bit of a rundown on where things are on the R&D side of things. But there's definitely efficacy and usefulness that comes from some of these kind of natural products. And there's benefit to these products because they do something, but they also don't harm too much. And you have all these side effects that arise out of maybe this kind of more kind of bioengineered products, if you like. And it's just trying to find that balance and make sure that you don't kind of say things. And we're seeing this a little bit in the market as well. People are saying things and it's not really working, and they're paying this crazy price for it. And it actually kind of it leaves a bad taste in customers' mouths. So there's definitely, we've got the most amazing feedback on our kawa product with regard to alleviating eczema and psoriasis. And just really quickly on this, again, I'll just jump into a bit of science stuff, but there are neurotransmitters between, let's say you get sunburn, rolled ankle, whatever. The body kind of, the immune response is that it creates swelling so that it can kind of like, number one, alert you to the issue, and then also it's part of the healing process. And it is proven that one of the plant agents in kawa reduces some of these kind of inflammation markers like nitric oxide. And so it reduces the swelling. But at the same time, if you say that it's, you got to prove that it works on something like eczema, and actually show through a clinical process actually does that. And you can have the literature that says one thing, and then you actually have to show that it works with people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, even steroid creams, and they're kind of, really, really hammed up with some of this kind of these chemicals. Sometimes they don't work because it's also something within your lifestyle that's creating that immune response, whether it be too much sugar or kind of not enough, not enough sleep. And so at the end of the day, even with the science, you're not actually treating the problem, and it's still just therapeutic. The problem, the underlying, the cause rather, you're maybe alleviating some of the symptoms. And so it's also part that kind of balance and that, getting that right too.
That's fascinating, because I guess ultimately you're correct. Like, we've seen these challenges with other clients in a similar sort of industry. Like, even like from a legality perspective, you can't actually claim that it's going to fix you, right? And but that's where essentially user generated content and allowing your customers to have those stories and bring that into the fold helps create trust and understand the product as well. Now I'm going on a tangent. I can't remember what I was going to say. But damn it, I was going to say something really important. Oh no, there we go. It came out to me. But what's preventing businesses like yourself to help educate customers more than just the product, right? You said to the point, like, if you're coming in with a concern being eczema related, yes, you've got a product for it, but what's preventing you from actually creating content that goes, hey, look, it could be a means of dietary problems. We could, maybe recommend not having this particular thing in your diet and trialing that, and help support your customers through that as well.
That's something that even popped up today, actually. We're just thinking about on the website having like, know your skin, kind of like as in question, like questions that what's good. It's so important. I would say it's just what's preventing us from kind of offering or kind of having more holistic, which is so important. It really is. We've got something like 60 blogs, maybe, that some scientific, some a bit more abstract. It's about number one, coming up with the what we think will work, but then trying to just get that to the broadcast it effectively. And we are getting, I think, better, and as I say, cutting our teeth on the most appropriate way to market and communicate what we're doing. But that definitely needs to be done. We need to kind of lean into that a bit more. And perhaps that's with most skincare or health businesses tend to be outsourced contract manufacturer, and they can really focus on marketing, and they can really know their customer and all these things that are really important for a business. And I think one of our strengths is our business model, but it can also be a bit of a challenge because you're really spread. And maybe in the theme of our discussion, but what's probably preventing us is maybe like a resource and time, which is one thing we've got to address.
Of course. I guess it's just from a brand perspective, in my opinion, external to all the logistics of resource and stuff. But it's really nice to see brands go outside their shell, where they're not just purely talking about their products and the ingredients of it. They kind of go exterior and actually consider concerns and other content just to help people. And even from an SEO perspective, a lot of people would probably vouch for that too. Just hesitant of time. I've got two more sort of like questions for you in particular. So, being part of the Māori culture and the heritage around that, what would you sort of recommend to I guess the question is, how do you foresee this scaling outside of a New Zealand business and coming into the likes of, is there a means to come into other heritages as well, like from Aboriginals or anything like that? How do you foresee that?
I remember early on with thinking about this idea of by territory working with the Indigenous people. So let's say and it's a bit of a it's okay. So with in North America in particular, my sister, she's at Harvard at the time, and her background is she's a lawyer, background in law, and a very, very good. She worked in litigation at Chapman Tripp, but her whole thesis at Harvard, now Oxford, for a PhD, is around the problematic nature of the commercialization of intellectual property of Indigenous peoples. I know it's a bit of a mouthful. And we had this kind of idea around, how cool it would be, because she did some work on reservations. I think it's the Navajo Nation, which is like one of the big ones over in North America. And we're like, how cool it would be to kind of share ideas and resource. She was based there for 6 to 8 months, but then you start to kind of, out of respect, kind of want to let them do their thing and maybe collaborate, but also just be very, very mindful that you're different people and different cultures, and so just one size, we've got our way of doing things, and similarly even in Australia. But it's awesome because we have a whole bunch. We had a group of First Nations from Aboriginal people from Australia come around, which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And we spent some time and kind of went out for feed and all the rest of it. And they have their whole an amazing corpus of knowledge as well. It's insane.
Yep. No, that makes sense. And then kind of like my bit of a closer. It's a really tough question for anyone that started a business, but like, if you could give anyone any piece of advice relating to how to start a business under your core values, so everything that you believe in, what would you recommend? And then secondary to that, in the world of science as well. I know I've made that question probably even tougher, but let's start with like the values. You believed in this. What would you recommend for that kind of person starting a business with that same mindset?
I hope this is the right answer. So what's the question again? For the first limb?
So the first question is a piece of advice.
Yeah.
When starting a business around your core values. So
Gotcha.
for you, right, being, Little Island, heritage.
Okay. Yep.
Things.
Yep. But it's a classic question. I think I'm probably a little different to most people just because business has been a vehicle to actually affect and kind of do things that we wanted to do. But then again, I think there's a lot of time I loved how you described it before, Ryan, how you said that you're trying to offer solutions for problems that you have on with how you've been brought up, whatever, that's so because it's a societal thing you're trying to address. Rather than like a consumer or kind of an issue that someone has, or there was a gap in the market or something. And I think it's really important to, a lot of the time you can kind of search for a problem to fix, but just really lucky that these things were things that I was exposed to, lack of power. We didn't have power. I didn't have power when I was growing up, which is such a weird thing to say. I remember, I was about 10 years old when we got our first generator instead of deep lead acid cycle batteries. So maybe perhaps this won't be the best answer because I'm a bit lucky here, but having a center that you can truly knowing why you're doing what you're doing, which informs how you go about what you do. And I think it's horses for courses because if you're playing in a particular space, it doesn't allow for that. It's just make a widget and sell as fast and hard as you can. But it really helps when you have this because it's just this drive and theme that really, and it's such a cliche, I know, but it means that you're not working. I hate to say that almost because it's such a cliche, but it really feels like that. And I think, and business is really hard, so it helps like kind of you handle the vicissitudes, the ups and downs. So yeah, I really hope that was a nuttick. Maybe the fact that I can just waffle and ramble is probably coming through in our comments because it's so confused.
No. I truly understand where that's coming from. Like, it is, it's an emotional thing to you, right? Like, I think that's a really key thing to that lesson is that it's personable, right? You were there to solve a problem, and therefore there's emotions for you to actually want to strive and make a difference and do something. Like, I won't tell my story, but I had something relatively similar. Like, look, I had a PlayStation in the 90s. I was lucky. I had power, but still just this challenge to do something is what drives you. And
that's cool.
I agree with you. It's like, it sounds like a cliche that you're not working and stuff like that. But again, the fact that you have that mindset gives you extreme amount of power to be successful because, you live and breathe it. You probably dream about it every day. You go out somewhere and you sit on the beach and you're probably still thinking about it. Like, you're constantly churning. And I think that's what sets a lot of people, well, it's probably good for people to hear that, is that if you are in that space, it's, it's not a bad thing. It's actually just take it and grasp it and try to do something with it because it's a superpower.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take up too much time because I don't want to break Todd Welling's record for an hour and a half, OD and chill. But honestly, dude, it's been an absolute privilege to have you, and thanks so much for joining this session. I think it was extremely insightful. It's probably quite a different OD and chill that we've done as well. So yeah, mate, honestly, really appreciate your time.
I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. Really, really enjoyed it. And really, really cool to actually spend an hour talk with you, Ryan.
Yeah, totally. And then, we'll enjoy our beer for the rest of the Friday, and I'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
awesome.
Right.